The lake looked peaceful that evening, but I knew better. There was a stillness in the air that pressed against my chest, a silence so deep it seemed to swallow the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. The water, dark and glossy, reflected the purple and orange hues of the dying sunset. It was my first night alone at Lake Hollow Pines, and I told myself the rumors were just that. Rumors. I had come here to escape the noise of the city, to find solace in nature. The old cabin I rented was charming, albeit a bit run down, and the lake seemed like the perfect backdrop for my solitude. Yet, as the sky darkened and the first stars began to peek through, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The stories about this place had been whispered among locals for years. They called it Whispering Waters, claiming that if you stayed here long enough, you'd hear voices calling from the lake, beckoning you closer. Some said it was the ghosts of people who had drowned. Others believed it was something far older, something evil that lived beneath the surface. I shook off the unease and decided to light a fire by the shore. The warmth and light would chase away the creeping dread, or so I hoped. I sat down in an old wooden chair I'd dragged out of the cabin and stared at the flames, letting their crackling soothe my nerves. Then I heard it. It was faint at first, barely audible over the fire, a soft, melodic hum drifting from the direction of the lake. My head snapped up, my eyes scanning the water, but there was nothing there. Just the same still surface, rippling slightly in the breeze. I told myself it was the wind, maybe a trick of the trees, but the sound grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't random noise. It was a song, mournful and sweet, the kind of melody that worms its way into your chest and makes your heart ache for reasons you can't explain. I stood up, my pulse quickening. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No response. The firelight didn't reach far enough to illuminate the lake, so I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the water. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the shoreline and a few scattered reeds. Everything looked normal, empty, lifeless. And then the hum stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was heavy, oppressive, and for a moment I felt like I couldn't breathe. I lowered the flashlight, convinced I was imagining things. But that's when I saw it. Ripples. They started small, radiating out from the center of the lake, but quickly grew larger, as if something massive was moving beneath the surface. My heart pounded in my chest. There were no boats, no fish big enough to cause such a disturbance. And then I heard the voice. "Come closer." It was soft, almost a whisper, but it was unmistakable. My blood turned to ice as I realized it wasn't coming from the lake. It was coming from behind me. I spun around, shining the flashlight toward the woods, but the beam illuminated nothing but trees. The fire crackled behind me, casting long shadows, and I felt a sudden primal urge to run. "Come closer," the voice repeated, this time from the direction of the lake. My legs felt rooted to the ground, every instinct screaming at me to get back to the cabin. But some part of me, a part I didn't understand, wanted to obey. The voice was irresistible, soothing and commanding all at once. Against my better judgment, I took a step toward the water. The ripples had stopped, and the lake was eerily calm again. But as I approached the shore, I noticed something floating in the water. At first, it looked like a piece of driftwood, but as I got closer, I realized it was a woman. She was pale, her long dark hair fanned out around her like seaweed. Her eyes were closed, her lips slightly parted, and she looked peaceful, too peaceful. "Help me," she whispered, though her lips didn't move. I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The beam spun wildly, illuminating the trees, the fire, and then the lake again. But when I looked back, the woman was gone. The lake's surface rippled once more, and this time something emerged. It wasn't the woman. A hand, skeletal and dripping with black water, broke the surface first, followed by an arm, then a head. The creature's face was grotesque, its eyes sunken and its mouth too wide, filled with jagged teeth. It stared at me with a hunger that froze the blood in my veins. I turned and ran. The cabin door slammed behind me and I locked it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. Outside, the woods were alive with noise. branches snapping, leaves rustling, and that horrible melodic humming. I backed away from the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps, and grabbed a knife from the kitchen counter. The firelight through the window flickered ominously, casting strange shadows across the room. Then, the humming stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, and then a single knock on the door. "Let me in," the voice whispered. I pressed my back against the far wall, clutching the knife so tightly my knuckles turned white. The doorknob rattled, then stopped. A moment later, the voice came again, this time from the window. "Come closer." I don't remember much after that. I must have passed out because when I woke up the sun was rising and the lake looked as serene as ever. But I'm not staying to find out what happens next. I'm leaving this place. And if you're ever tempted to visit Lake Hollow Pines, don't. Because some voices are better left unheard.